All right, guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Adam, also known as the Plant Power Coach. Today, I am joined by Rupert. Rupert is a colleague of mine. He works in a gym, and we have a lot of similarities when it comes to fitness, but we tend to disagree when it comes to the topic of veganism. So thank you, Rupert, for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, mate.
Fantastic. So I guess the first question, I'm assuming a lot of people watching, they have some understanding of who I am, what my sort of background is. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, don't have to go ever since like you were born, but it's more like tell us a little bit about yourself, obviously in the context of, I guess, fitness, career,
Sure.
and you could jump into, I don't know,
Yeah,
I guess when you discovered veganism, maybe something like that.
yeah, sure. So basically, I got into martial arts in my teens, and it was mainly because I had low self-confidence,
Yep.
and um, from there, I carried it on for many years, and then I decided to pursue it as a career, and then from there, that my I found my calling in helping people to flourish, and
Yep.
I find it very, very rewarding.
Yep.
So I decided to do it as a full-time career.
Fantastic. And from a martial arts point of view, I have no background in martial arts. Like I have no idea where to begin with that. But I think I understand that there's kind of different types. Like you've got judo, you've got karate, taekwondo. Where do
Hmm.
you specialize in? And I mean, has that evolved? Has that been one thing the whole way through?
No, so I started out wanting to do boxing, and my friend convinced me to do Thai boxing. And I so striking really, and then for a very long time I wanted to get into more grappling side of things because I wasn't
Mm.
too keen on getting punched in the face all the time.
Yep.
So I discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which was it's just one of those. It's kind of like they say it's like yoga but involuntary yoga.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and I got to about blue belt, but I've been on a 3 year hiatus. I'm looking to get back into it soon.
And I'm guessing a lot of that has been more focused on prioritizing other people's fitness levels and trying to get them on track down the same
It's
route.
exactly, yeah, just focusing on business because at the time when the lockdown happened,
Mm.
that was like the main priority.
Yeah,
So
got you. So obviously today we've got the topic of the fact that we're both in the fitness industry, both in very different parts. Like I said, I have no background in martial arts, but when we're talking about veganism, right? Obviously, I've already mentioned the fact that you're not vegan. Maybe there's been a time where you've heard about it. Maybe you've heard about it and were curious about it. Maybe you heard about it and you had no intentions. How has that sort of definition popped up in your life?
so e- e- every experience I've had with someone who calls himself a vegan, it's always been quite a respectful interaction,
Hmm.
and there have been the occasional few who tend to ram their sort of views down your
Yeah,
throat.
yeah,
But all in all, I do understand that most people are coming from a place of um, like people that love animals and see it as cruelty to
yeah,
animals. I do understand that.
yeah,
And most of the conversations have been around just like look thinking of alternatives.
yeah,
And the main thing is, could you actually um, would you become a vegan if you could eat something that tasted just like me? And I said,
yeah,
probably,
yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha. You've mentioned you've had some positive and even some negative experience. Are both those examples from people that you know personally, or people like acquaintances, or kind of seen online? Where would you put those people?
Mainly acquaintances. I
Yeah.
don't think I have any vegan friends
Oh, we've got
apart from
me,
you,
mate.
Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. I do have a couple of, they're not disclaimers, they're kind of just so we understand we're getting on the same page. Number one, whenever I have a conversation with anyone about this topic, it kind of goes towards the expression moving the goalpost. Are you familiar what I mean by moving the goalpost? So
Yeah.
obviously, like, it's like, let's say the topic of protein comes up. we're talking about protein, and then I find the person that I'm talking with tends to kind of transition that conversation into something else without addressing the original conversation, which in this example would be protein. So I just kind of want to put it out there that whenever we're kind of on a topic, before we move on to the next topic, which I'm happy to do, I want to get to the goal first before we change it. So I might say something like, we're moving the goalpost here. So that's the kind of first disclaimer. The second disclaimer is not necessarily, again, a disclaimer. It's actually the first question that I've got noted down on my notes. And I think it's pretty understanding for most people to have a different definition of veganism. I think most vegans are on the same page. I say most of them, not all of them. I think a lot of vegans have the wrong definition of veganism. There is no right or wrong answer here, considering that you're not essentially vegan. But what is your definition of vegan, so we can kind of get on the same page?
Somebody who's against the cruelty to animals.
Okay, well, we're basically on the same page then. I want to read off what the so this is actually the vegansociety.com's website, and they have a very, very good definition, although a lot of people within the community have stated that there's probably a few words that could be a bit better. But you're on the right track with what you've said, but they've literally just defined it as: veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, and this is the important part, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development of use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of the animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, this is the sort of correlation aspect, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. And to add to what you've said before, because I think it's a great definition, is that we're looking to do it as practicable as possible. If this is a crazy example, but like, if you were driving down the street and someone had popped out of nowhere and you'd accidentally hit them and done something to them, you wouldn't really put that person in a category of abuser or exploiter or harmer or murderer. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah, I get that.
I think that's a
It was more of an
really
accident.
Exactly. There's kind of it's the intention and necessity
Tension, yeah.
behind it. The intention and necessity behind it. Another thing to add on that sort of as well, which is a conversation I had with George, who was our first interviewer, and talking about the sort of
really
interesting. Did you watch that video? Did you watch that?
No, I didn't. No,
That's okay.
I will
So,
though.
so we actually had the conversation of a psychologist who she uses something called the 3 N's of reasonings of what we use to justify something we know is wrong. And the 3 N's are normal, natural, and necessary. So if you look all throughout history, whenever we kind of have justified things which are wrong, like slavery or anything like that, we've defined them as one of the 3 N's, if not two or even all of them, as normal, natural, and necessary, which I think is a huge, huge thing to understand, because like for every one thing someone claims that is natural, I could probably give them 10 things that they do that's unnatural, like driving a car, using a phone, and that kind of shows that we're not on the same page, and people don't really fully understand what they're trying to express, right? So I'm going to start off. I usually don't start off. I usually kind of build up towards this question, but considering what we've just discussed on the topic definition of veganism, what evidence would you have to be provided to change your position on the topic?
I think the main thing would be if there was unquestionable, undeniable evidence that the if everybody became a vegan, that would be it would be sustainable, and that the whole world could be fed. and I guess like I'm thinking of like the farmers as well, like the businesses, the people that have
Yep.
vested financial interest in the industry. If
Sure.
they could also be able to um, have something to be substituted, so they can continue
Yeah.
making their business to continue making money.
Hmm.
I think mainly it's feeding the planet really,
Yeah.
and finding uh, ways in which to do that
Yep.
sustainably and efficiently.
Absolutely. I think like the first thing I want to say to that is I think a lot of people when they have conversations like this they can go one way into the sort of science of things, which I really
Mm.
like. And I follow a lot of people, and they've literally got like articles and all this sort of stuff and evidence to show with. I think my approach is slightly different. I'm highly motivated by the scientific aspect of things. But if I
Mm.
can have a conversation with someone using logic and reasoning, I think that's kind of a more efficient way to do it. So in this example, like what I would like to bring up because the sustainability factor. We can talk about the farmers in a second, which again is I think is a great point. The sustainability aspect is okay. So right now, these animals are essentially food. How are we going to be feeding the population? I really like that, first of all, because you've actually said the word we, which is not commonly used between by carnists. So, by the way, carnist is the opposite of a vegan. Someone who's vegan is
Okay.
abstains from animal products, and someone who doesn't, essentially, which is technically defined as a carnist. So, um, yeah, so carnists usually kind of like me. Like I need to get my protein. I want this because it tastes good. Whereas in you haven't done that actually. You've actually said we as a population need to figure out a solution, which I think is a great step. Um, so the thing there is like the animals that we consume, they need to eat something, right? And the first thing you might be thinking of, well, cows eat grass. We're not going to eat grass. But the reality is cows some cows do eat grass, but the vast majority of them, considering that we're talking about factory farming, not even including factory farming, these free range sort of things, they get fed lots of things like soy, lots of food, lots of resources that actually can be used towards humans, right? Does that make sense? So based off
Yeah.
based off that, like considering we feed when we're talking about land animals, I think it's estimated to be like I think it's 10 billion land animals, something crazy like that. That's not even including the fish that we have. If we include fish, we go into the trillions, right? But from a land
Mm.
animal point of view, we're feeding so many land animals, and even if it's just a small percentage of them eating foods that we could consume, 10 billion animals, and we have a population of 9 billion people, and not everyone is starving necessarily, but there is a large percentage of people who are struggling. Um, the argument I would put forward is that okay, by taking away the food, by not feeding these animals instead, so not breeding them into existence in the first place, and not having to feed these animals, we're essentially creating more available food, and the economy of certain foods like rice, soy, beans, lentils, all those sorts of foods become cheaper and more affordable to people who have less options, let's say, when it comes to food. Does that make sense, or am I confused? You look a bit confused.
No, I was just wondering, is it not cheap at the moment? Are those foods like lentils and rice and things like that? Are they not cheap
Oh, they're
already?
extremely cheap. They're the cheapest foods that we can get as human beings. Yeah. So that's another factor as well. Like when we have animal-based products, milk, dairy in itself, meat, all these foods get subsidized by the government. So these animal-based products actually create a false economy. So we're feeding these resources, these like essentially energy, so calories to animals, which
Mm.
then actually provide us with fewer calories, less energy in the first place, because these animals are essentially using this energy by being alive, right?
Yeah.
creating CO2 gases in the first place, which is environmental. I don't really like to talk about the environmental aspect, even though it is, it is a big topic. And we're getting less calories from that. So let's say we feed a cow over its lifetime. I don't know exactly what the math is, 100,000 calories, right? From that, we're actually losing so many calories to be able to fed to humans, right? So it's essentially
Right.
the law of thermodynamics, right? Yeah.
Right.
We're, are we on the same page
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, yeah. I'm with
Yeah.
you. I'm with
Yeah.
you. Wait,
Cool.
what's the question though? What is the question then?
Yeah. So back to your point about sort of essentially saying that we we need to find a system that can be that we can reach all people, people who are
Right.
starving, people who have less food. Your argument would be like, let's find a solution for that. And I believe by going vegan, by the whole world going vegan, actually, which when I say the whole world, I'm not talking about these tribes in Africa that don't have a choice. We're not talking about that because I don't think those people are necessarily like they have a justification, essentially. We're talking about the vast majority of the population, you and I, who live in the Western world, who have plenty of options. We go to the grocery store, we have plenty of alternatives. We're not short of supply of anything, especially
Mm.
rice, beans, lentils. Affordability is, like you said, super cheap. By doing that, we essentially reduce supply and demand because
Okay.
the, the farmers, I
I
don't
hear
think
you.
are at fault. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. Well, the first thing that pops up into my mind is like the supply of the sort of certain vitamins that you get from meats that you get probably more of from meats, but it's not impossible to get in a vegan diet. It's perfectly possible to get it in a vegan diet, from my understanding. Um, but I believe that it's just way more accessible through meat consumption.
Cool.
Um,
Can I just stop there for a second?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Go on, go on, go on, go on.
I believe we've had a position of moving the goalpost there. We can talk
I
about
see.
vitamins and minerals. I'm happy to talk about
Yeah,
that,
cool.
but the original topic was sustainability of reaching everyone, right? So the
Yeah, yeah.
argument would be against that topic, which is like, well, we have plenty of food that we're feeding to animals.
Mm,
My argument is, why don't we just use that food to feed the needy,
yeah,
or at least create an economy where it's even cheaper than it already is?
yes, yeah. I would say, yeah, I would agree that. Well, I don't know all the facts with regards to production, so I can't say with certainty, with great
Again,
certainty.
as
But yeah,
opposed
I mean, it def yeah.
sorry, no, I was going to say, as opposed to just me and you whipping out studies, does it not just make sense, just based off logic and reasoning, to say that the food we feed these animals food? We have to, right? These animals aren't
Yeah.
just magically getting photosynthesized energy from the sun, right? They're
Mhm.
consuming something, and by extension, that food is the energy they're consuming is essentially going to waste because we're later consuming
Mm,
their bodies,
yeah, yeah,
which provide fewer calories than they've been fed in the first place.
yeah.
Yeah. So is
Yeah, so
yeah,
I know one example would be like in China, they you know they've got rice. They survive. They survive. They're a huge population, and one of the biggest reasons is
yeah,
the mass production of rice. So
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm saying yeah. I mean, you could feed the world with non-animal
yeah.
or plant-based products. Yeah,
Okay, fantastic. I like that. We're on the same page with that. So
yeah.
you mentioned a few things about the vitamins and minerals, that sort of thing. Do you want to go back to that? Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, just the point of this, just as I said, having access to uh, things like iron, the B vitamins. I'm sure this is like a typical argument that is made.
Mm,
Um, that's just my understanding of it. I don't really know anything more
yeah.
around like a vegan diet, and if it's all I know is that in the past people that um, have become vegan for a certain
Mm,
amount of time have had difficulty getting in
yeah.
uh, those vitamins.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Um, that is a fantastic point. I want to take a little bit of a step back before I kind of, let's say, counter argument. I understand what people mean by vegan diet, but at the same time, I don't consider a vegan diet healthy or unhealthy because a vegan diet can be either one, right? If you're a
Mm,
vegan and you abstain from using animal-based products, you can live off Oreos and French fries and you can become extremely sick, iron deficient, as you've
mm,
said. And you can have someone who's a vegan like myself who trains very hard, 5 to 6 days a week, goes to the gym, eats lots of food. I consider myself very healthy, and the and there's a huge gap. But philosophically speaking, me and a person who have these sort of beliefs, we're still vegan, right? So I think based off that, I think the better term to use is plant-based, right?
okay.
And when we talk about like plant-based and stuff, someone who just eats Oreos and crisps and stuff like that, I wouldn't consider them plant-based because they're not really eating. They are eating plants, but it's so processed it's just become something else essentially, right? Um, so yeah, so based off that, like to kind of reframe the question, yeah, can you become deficient by eating a vegan diet? Yes. Can you become deficient by eating a plant-based diet? Yes. Can you become deficient by eating a non-vegan, non-plant-based diet? Absolutely. Right. I think when we're talking about vitamins and minerals and these sorts of things, uh, do we get them from animal-based products? 100% yes, we do. We do. Like
Mm,
there's no arguing that. I was like, oh, animal-based products have let's say iron, whatever. They have calcium from milk, right? What we need to understand is a couple of things. Because these products have these certain vitamins and certain minerals in it, does it justify killing them? Yes or no? Considering we can get it from alternative as well
mm.
to add to that.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. But I think I might be moving the goalpost here.
The situation or the context is going to be for you and I. Like we're talking about essentially, we want to talk about population. Fantastic. I agree with that.
yeah, yeah.
Let's consider the Western world. We have Tesco nearby. We've got alternatives.
Mm,
We've got fortified cow's milk and we've got fortified soy milk, right? Both essentially got plenty of protein, plenty of calcium. If you want to use the argument of, you know, a certain plant-based products have less calcium or less vitamin vitamin B, yes, we can definitely
yeah.
go down that route. The way I see it is if we're going to say that we can justify killing an animal for a certain vitamin, then we need to understand that in other countries like China, where they eat dogs, for example, they could use
Mm,
the same example. I highly doubt you and I would be okay with eating dog.
mm. No, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't eat
Yeah.
dog. Just to put it out there.
Yeah, good, good, good.
um, I would say that it really does depend, but I'm I don't. If you had an animal in front of you and then you said, you know, should we just kill this animal purely on the basis that it has nutrients in it that
Mm.
I'm not going to get a lot of from a plant? I would say no.
But
In that
that's literally
example,
what happens.
I would say no. Yeah. Um, but then when you're looking at like large scale,
Hmm.
and I'm talking like the world, it's just a different that's a different situation. As in, we've got billions of people to feed.
Yeah. So
Um, yeah.
another thing I should have added to that as well is that the vitamins and minerals that we get from animal-based products, where do they get it from?
Mm. I'm assuming that they're fed it.
Yeah, exactly. They're either fed it or they're fortified. They're essentially like, for example, B12. Most animals that, you know, have plenty of B12 in their system is because they're
Mm.
being injected with B12. So
Mm.
they're essentially being supplemented. Vegans tend to just go directly to the supplement and go directly to the source, right?
Mm.
No one's suggesting we eat grass because there's plenty of plant-based options
Sure.
with lots of variety and that sort of thing. Um, to get plenty of your vitamins and minerals and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so like I know people talk about bioavailability of foods, that's these sorts of things. Again, this is a funny example I used one time, and it was basically a friend of mine saying that plant-based foods don't get enough B12, and I actually sent him a screenshot of a steak and the level of B12, but I didn't show him that was a steak. I just sent him a screenshot of the thing, and he assumed that I was showing a plant-based alternative. But and he goes, "See, you're not getting enough B12, you're not getting enough this, enough that." And I said, "Mate, I've just sent you a screenshot of a steak," and he had to like backpedal against that. So it was a really funny conversation because like it's like obviously
Yeah.
portion control matters. Obviously, like the number of calories we consume matters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I truly believe people will struggle at the beginning when going plant-based
Yeah.
slash vegan, simply from a habitual point of view. You've
Yeah.
spent so much time eating meat, dairy, and eggs that you're going to find it extremely difficult to break that routine of eating eggs for breakfast, having bacon sandwich, for whatever it might be. And
Mm-hmm.
and the problem is if people go cold turkey like that, which I want them to, but in the right way, they're essentially removing what could be a potentially healthy 2,000 calories, which I'll admit is a healthy amount of calories, to then 200 calories of salads and kale and vegetables, which is definitely not sustainable, not healthy, and you're going to lack many vitamins and minerals. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, does that all kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It
I
does.
just want to mention that we've had the 10-minute timer pop up, so we're about 8 minutes left. Um,
Sweet.
So yeah, we're gonna have to
I mean,
well
oh,
not not wrap it up or anything like that. But I just
it's
kind of
cool.
want to see like we've covered kind of a couple points on there. Would you like me to cover the point of like the farmers, or do you have another sort of, let's call it, the goal that we want to
No,
hit?
no. I'd really like you to cover like the that aspect of it because
Yeah,
it's definitely something that if your livelihood is tied into this,
yeah,
and I'm sidetracking a little bit, but I also I don't know if you know about the sugar zealots who are so tied into their sort of beliefs that they're unwilling to sort of change for
yeah,
financial reasons because they profit off of
yeah,
um, being against sugar. So I was wondering, like, how could you convince someone who's so,
yeah.
particularly farmers who are so tied into that industry?
Absolutely. To just really quickly cover the sugar aspect, again, I'm divided in the two aspects. I don't consider sugar to be a health food, but then again, sugar doesn't necessarily contribute to animal suffering. So, in my eyes, similar to, let's call it, drugs, alcohol, things that I think most people would agree are poisonous to the human being, I can't really impose on that person. Someone who goes to the pub every single day, drinks 10 pints,
Mm,
is this in the same category for sugar for me? Like, I just don't see any point. I think sugar can be a great tool for people like cyclists, people who are athletes, to get a great big boost of energy. So it has its good and its bads, you know. From a sugar point of view, I can't say anything negative really. It's like I said, it's a tool, just much like alcohol. That being said,
mm,
you
I would
disagree?
put it in the same category as alcohol, but I think that's another conversation for
No, I
another
don't. I
time.
don't. I'm not saying it's in the same category as alcohol. I'm saying that
Okay.
if we take the extreme point, which is
Oh,
some people say, which is sugar is as addictive as cocaine. I don't agree with that. I don't think
right.
that's true.
Okay.
I don't think that's in the same category at all. I'm saying even if we were to put it in that same category, like it's still not an argument against veganism or against anything like that, right? Because it's not necessarily contributing to animal suffering. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I wasn't saying that it was. I wasn't going to use the sugar as a sort of an argument. I was just trying to make a point that
Mm.
when someone's like really invested in their belief and it makes
Yeah.
them a lot of money, it's how do you convince, in this case, the farmers
Yeah. Okay.
that by changing over to other farming methods, i.e.,
Yeah.
farming only animal plant-based, sorry,
Yeah.
plant-based product, how do
That's
you because there's a lot of money to be made in the meat industry.
Yeah, it all goes back to supply and demand. Like meat, dairy, and eggs has been around for a long, long time, but there's no reason why an industry should just completely end. And that's based off people's choices. Like this happens in businesses all the time, even tech businesses. A tech industry can be around for decades, and then all of a sudden, people are
Mm.
just like, I don't need MySpace anymore. I'm not going to use it anymore. And
Yeah.
it's not to say we hate it. It's just to say that we're realizing that there are more sustainable or better ways to do it. And to, like, farmers these days, they're already suffering. Like, there's farmers who post videos all the time saying that they're earning equivalent of $2 an hour because they're self-employed and they have to sell because no one's buying it, and they're trying to have this sort of like, guys, you need to buy more milk because my business is suffering. I believe that that's a terrible entrepreneurial move. What we need to say is that, look, where is the market going? Like, this is even a question of business, where it's just like people are realizing that they don't need to need to contribute to the exploitation of female reproductive systems, which is essentially what happens to cows, to get dairy, right? So what alternatives do we have, right? So farmers, I want to support farmers, right? People want to support farmers, right? Like when we go, there are many businesses which actually help businesses like farmers transition. And there's been plenty of testimonials of people who have gone from animal farming to plant-based farming. Not only has it been very kind of smooth for them, but it's also allowed them to get in an industry where they're able to thrive more. And 9 times out of 10, if you're feeding your animals to then eat them anyway, you're usually having to farm the plants anyway. So all you're
Mm.
doing is transitioning by expanding the plant-based aspect and
Yeah.
removing the animal-based aspect. And like to give you the sort of kind of nail in the coffin, back in the day when we had slavery and we had slave owners and we had people who used to sell slaves, I don't think anyone would be like, oh, what about the slave owners? What about the salespeople of the slaves? No one cares about them. Like, if they're going to contribute down this sort of terrible industry, like, that's that is a huge mistake from their part, but both ethically and morally. But if you're not going to at least be open to the idea of changing, then I have nothing else to say than too
Mm.
bad, you know?
Mm. You're right about the. I remember that before you mentioned something about. I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah,
like we've grown into this sort of into this way of thinking,
yeah,
right? We've been conditioned to eat meat. It's normal for us. I kind of think
exactly.
that I couldn't live without meat. I
Mm,
can't imagine a world without my favorites. My favorite like salami or
mm,
steaks or whatever. So I'm wondering. Well, I truly believe that if I'd grown up as a vegetarian, I would have been none the wiser.
mm,
Certainly believe that that's possible.
yeah,
But currently, that's not the way that I was sort of born into the world. So it's like you're also trying to convince a lot of people to take away a pleasure in life too,
absolutely.
um, which is tough because there's so many things to be really.
Mm,
It's a tough world out there for a lot of
yeah,
people, and just take away like meat is almost like taking away alcohol, I guess, for some
yeah,
people.
absolutely.
Even though alcohol has no like benefits for you whatsoever.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
100%. All I want to say now is that our time is going to run out. So are you
Okay.
okay to jump into another meeting room, if that's okay with you?
Yeah.
Or yeah, okay.
Perfect.
Have you got the time?
Yeah.
You got the time, yeah?
Yeah, I've got time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool, perfect. Give me 1 second and we'll jump
Cool.
into another meeting room.
Brilliant.